Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz Sedkanian, and I'm the project manager for the Land Development Code Update, abbreviated LDC. I wanted to start this by thanking you all for your interest in the LDC. We appreciate the time you have spent submitting modifications to the code and attending workshops like this. I want to go over the schedule today for the workshop. We have brief presentations regarding LDC basics, overview of a few of the proposed amendments, followed by a Q&A. If we have not already moved on to the Downtown Plan District Ordinance amendments by 3:40, we will at that time. I would like to introduce our team on the call. We have Brian Schoenfish, the Deputy Director for the Urban Division of DSD, Seth Litchney, Program Manager for the Planning Department, and Senior Planners Corey Funk, Melissa Garcia, and Jeff Ryan, who will be assisting me with monitoring the chat and Q&A. As a reminder, the language and item matrices are on the 2022 Code Update website, and this link is being placed in the chat. So what is the LDC update? The Land Development Code is chapters 11 through 14 of the San Diego Municipal Code. These chapters cover the development regulations and zoning for the city of San Diego. The Planning Department monitors and continually updates these sections of the code on an annual basis through submissions from members of the public and city staff. Code organization. I wanted to briefly go over how to read code sections. The municipal code is organized by chapter, division, and page number. For example, section 143.1001 is chapter 14, article 3, division 10, and page 1. For the timeline for the LDC update, we're scheduled for Planning Commission on October 27th and tentatively scheduled for the LUNH Committee on November 17th and City Council on December 6th. I know questions always arise. When will these items go into effect? Assuming the council approves this item on December 6th, our second hearing would occur in January. Once the mayor signs this ordinance, the regulations will be chaptered into our code after 30 days. We anticipate the items will take into effect in February 2023 for areas outside of the coastal overlay zone. For the coastal overlay zone, after adoption, the LDC update will be submitted to the Coastal Commission for review, and once certified, will take effect. The 2022 code update has 53 citywide updates. Updates to the code are grouped into 5 categories: clarifications, compliance with state law, corrections, regulatory reform, and amendments that align policy with the city's climate, equity, and housing goals. These amendments aid in streamlining the permitting process, assure compliance with state and federal regulations, and eliminate unnecessary barriers, redundancies, and contradictions. Next, I'm going to go over a few items in the LDC update. As a reminder, please save your questions and comments for the Q&A portion of this workshop. One of the items to comply with state law is item 14, residential zones max floor area. This is so we can comply with SB 478. The item details maximum floor area standards for housing development projects greater than 2 units located in multifamily zones. As part of this amendment, we have updated the use tables for multifamily residential zones to reflect that the floor area ratio for a housing development project that consists of 3 to 7 homes may not have a maximum FAR standard of less than 1, and 8 to 10 homes may not have a maximum FAR standard of less than 1.25. Additionally, developments of up to 2 units in historic districts or properties included on the State Historic Resources Inventory are not subject to the new maximum floor area ratios. Regulatory reforms. Item 2, posted notices. This revises the code language for posted notices to a reasonable size from 12 square feet to 6 square feet, but still ensures increased visibility with the posting requirements. Item 7, development permit utilization, type 1 construction. Extends the utilization timeline for these permits from 36 to 48 months. Item number 11, coastal overlay zone, CIP project decision process. Reduces the decision process level from a CIP process 5 to a process 3 in the coastal appealable area. Item 17, industrial-based zones, retail sales, allows for businesses in the IBT zone to conduct retail sales limited to 10% of the gross floor area of the building they are located in. Item 21, battery energy storage facilities, adds a new section related to the battery energy storage facilities and updates the use tables with applicability. Item 43 is historical resources regulations, pool demolition permits. Exempt historical review for pool demolitions on sites that are over 45 years old. The next item we have is item 20, sea level rise acknowledgement, adds supplemental regulations for areas of future sea level rise under Chapter 13, Article 2, Division 4, and references this in the sections related to our housing programs. Next, we have item 5. This is the definition of a sustainable development area. This creates a new definition for a geographic designation for certain programs to be used in place of a transit priority area and aligns with our climate action plan goals to ensure development that uses our new programs is walkable to high quality transit. An SDA also means the area with an established walking distance along a pedestrian path of travel from a major transit stop that is existing or planned if the planned major transit stop is included in a transportation improvement program or applicable regional transportation plan as follows. Within mobility zones 1, 2, and 3, as defined in section 143.1103, the defined walking distance is 1 mile. Within mobility zone 4, as defined in section 143.1103, the defined walking distance is 0.75 miles. Please note the amendments related to a sustainable development area will not go into effect until will not go into effect until a year later to allow for time for implementation. Next, my colleagues will be assisting us in monitoring the chat and Q&A. To organize this portion of the workshop, we have grouped the items and listed every item on the subsequent slide. When an item you'd like to comment on is shown, please leave your question under the Q&A section. If you would like to have a comment recorded for the record, leave it in the chat. We have about an hour and a half to go over questions and we'll do our best to address everything. If we advance a slide without answering your question, please submit your questions via email. As a reminder, at 3:40, if we have not already moved on to downtown PDO amendments, we will do so at that time. Additionally, I wanted to share our order for the Q&A. This will also be dropped into the chat for you to reference. Before we start, are there any questions? Okay, I just see a question to ask when the workshop is posted on the city website. As soon as that happens, we'll do our best. I see we have a raised hand. Oh, chat is disabled. Let me work on that for you real quick. Perfect. This chat should be enabled at that time. Thank you for notifying us about that.
Hey, Liz, we had one first question.
Okay.
I will be directing to them now.
Jeff, did we have a question?
Bear with me, we're having technical difficulties right now.
Okay, I do see once again, a few people have asked. A few people had asked us about receive a copy of the workshop. It's going to be posted on the code update website. Here, let me.
Liz,
Okay, Jeff, I just unmuted you.
Great, I see that. So quickly,
there's a lot to cover here. It sounds like you have a limited amount of time and you're going to switch. So if an item, if you run out of time before an item comes up, will it be taken in the order where you left off in the next session? In particular, I'm interested in item 5, and it's at the very end, and I don't see us getting to that today.
So Jeff, what we did is we've actually allowed, I've gone through and allowed a specific amount of time per slide. Right now, baked into our schedule, I have 20 minutes allowed for item 5.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then Suzanne, you had your hand up. Suzanne, I was trying to unmute you. Are you able to talk? Okay, Suzanne, if you're able to leave your comment in the chat or put in the Q&A, I can always come back to you. And then Charles, I'm going to unmute you real quickly.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi. I've recently had problems with both the city and the county regarding getting rid of any regulations which delay or increase the cost of ADUs.
Okay, Charles, I'm going to have someone drop it into the chat. I think this is more kind of like an open-ended question and not related to a code item. Someone's going to put in my email in the chat, and I'd be happy if you want to email me after this workshop, and I can help you out with that.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Perfect. I'm going to move on to our first slide. So first, I wanted to start off. Does anyone have any questions with item 1, noticing requirements? Item 14, residential zones, maximum floor area ratio, and item 29, landscape requirements, regulations for water conservation requirements. Perfect. I see item 2, post and notice. For the font size, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one, but we are saying that it has to be legible and able to read. So, Kay Neal, if you can actually send me an email after that, I can look into that for you. Okay, are there any questions before I move on? I know Charles has a question about the floor area ratio. This actually, what we're doing is we're changing it based, this is state law, it's for SB 478. It actually modifies it when you're building more than 2 units, so anywhere between 3 and 10 units. I see Cheryl, you have a question about the water. Are you able to put your question into the chat? And then real quick, Charles, I see you're still asking questions about the 60/40. If it's 1 unit, the existing FARs still remain. We're not changing that. We're only changing what the code is required, or what state law is requiring us to do. Okay, I also see we have a question about battery or energy storage facilities. I'm going to ask that you wait and come back, ask that question again when we get to that slide. And then just a reminder for everybody, please limit your questions to only the items listed on this slide so we're able to get through everything. Okay, now I'm wanting to open it up if we have questions for item 2, item 7, item 11, item 12, or item number 17. As a reminder, when you're asking your question, please reference the item number as well, just because we're following along with the matrix. To Jeff's question, we actually prefer if you can put it first in the Q&A. We can always unmute you just to get further clarification, but I think our goal is getting everything for the record because we can also publish the Q&A log. Okay, I see we have, I see Cheryl has a question and she wasn't able to get to it. Cheryl, if you can actually raise your hand, I want to make sure we answer that, and then I can unmute you. Okay, and then Cheryl, I have Daniel Neary on the line. He's also in DSD to kind of help answer those questions.
Hi, this is Cheryl Brierton, and I had my hand raised and you told me to type it. So now I've raised it again. Right, well, I'm concerned about water conservation and what the city's overall approach is in the regulations. I know that in some jurisdictions, they're eliminating swimming pools and they're taking very drastic measures. And we've gotten a mixed message here in San Diego about our water supplies, some saying it's just fine and others saying it's not good. So I'm concerned about, in that first slide, what you're going to be doing about water for our city.
So Cheryl, this is more kind of like an open-ended questions for this workshop, just because we have a limited amount of time. This is just questions related to the code amendments that we're putting in. So the code amendments are related to landscape requirements. Please email.
So are you going to eliminate swimming pools then as part of your amendments?
This is not part of this is not part of the amendment.
So we're not allowed to suggest amendments. We can only react to whatever you have proposed.
We actually have the 2023 code update portal open, so you're welcome to submit that. I can have one of my colleagues put that link in the chat for you, but as of right now, we're not making any more further changes for this year.
So when is it possible to present in a public forum suggestions for code amendments? We only we don't get very many opportunities to interact with city staff before something goes to the city council.
So Cheryl, for that, we have non-agenda public comments at our city council meetings and our city council committee meetings. But one of my colleagues, Jeff Ryan, has put in the chat the link to submit a code amendment for next year. So thank you very much for your suggestion. Okay, we had a question for item 11. The process 3 is going to be for Christine Smith asked, what's the work for process 3? That's going to be the same as the building, any process 3 that's for a building permit. It will go to a hearing officer and then it's appealable to the planning commission. Kay Neal asked a question about base zones. I'm going to ask, just so we can move along, if you can send me an email after this meeting and then I can address it. I know you, again, for item 14, Kay Neal asked, how does an ADU work on a multifamily? Is it only a base zone? If you can please email me this after the meeting, I'd be happy to answer it. Andrew Bowen asked us a question for item 17. Would this allow the retail sale of cannabis products at cannabis production facilities? That is not the intent to allow that. So I will definitely look into that to make sure that won't occur. Hey, I'm going to go on to the next slide at this time. Perfect. Next, I want to see if there's any questions related to item number 21, 25, paleontological resource monitoring, item 38, design regulation for parking facilities, aisle dimensions, item 24, sign regulations, permanent secondary signs, and item 43, historical resource regulations, pool demolition permits. Are there any open questions for these items? I'm going to give you guys another minute just to allow people enough time. Hi, Jeanette. Thank you for reaching out. This is to comply with our CAP goals. For the question about why CEP was required, some locations we decided there's sensitive areas that we want to be cognizant of. So we wanted to ensure that there are review procedures in place. We also have a question from Claude about how will the governor's removal of parking regs affect item 38. Claude, I believe you're talking about AB 2097. That is not going to be part of the LDC update, but we're hoping to address that later in our Housing Action Package 2.0. Charles also asked, have the parking regulations changed? We are not changing any parking regulations as part of the 2022 LDC update. Cheryl, I'm going to have my coworker put that link in the chat for you. I'm sorry it's not in there yet, but we'll be on top of that. So Jeff actually put it in the chat. I'm going to re-put this in the chat, Cheryl, so you're able to see it. Okay, I'm going to have one of my coworkers do it because unfortunately I'm not able to man everything right now, but let me double check any of our other items. So we did have a question from Jeffrey about item 12. Let me go back because he probably didn't have enough time. We went through that. Item 12, Coastal Commission permit procedures, electronic notice. This just allows more flexibility. Once a final decision is made by the Coastal Commission, we're allowing that people are being able to notify by electronic notice that a decision has been made. So this isn't going to be the first notice that's received to noticing people of a hearing. This is just notifying the final decision. For the question about CAP and coastal zones, as we went over for that for item 11, any decision made by the hearing officer is appealable to the Planning Commission. So there is there would be 2 public hearings in place for those items to be appealed. Jeffrey asked us a question about the battery energy storage facilities. Our regulations only apply for the city of San Diego. Okay, before I move on, are there last chance I wanted to check any questions related to items 21, 25, 38, 42, and 43. Jeanette asked, the notice of final action is not to public normally, it's to the Coastal Commission. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. Cheryl, I know you still have questions about item 12. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. I will put my email address in the chat. But unfortunately, we do have to move on to make sure we cover everything. Okay, next, I want to bring up our landscape regulations. This is going to be item 38, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37. I do have Daniel Neary on the line to assist me with questions. Do we have any questions for these items? Okay, at this time, I do not see any questions. I will move on. I do want to thank Daniel for being on the line to assist. At this time, we have completed all the landscape regulations questions. Okay, now we're moving on to our corrections and clarifications. I wanted to see, I have Cheryl asking us a question about the brush requirements. Cheryl, are you able to put your comment in the Q&A, please? Onto this slide, I have David Moody. He's asking us a question about number 15. At a previous meeting, we discussed how the use regulations regarding setbacks for ADUs cannot be used to affect setbacks under developmental regulations, but what makes this do so? David, one thing I wanted to let you know is we did talk to DSD about this. What we're going to look at doing is putting clarification in an information bulletin that's going to say that the setbacks for an ADU will not affect any other dwelling unit on the property. Charles, if you can be more specific, I know you're asking for the setback requirements. I know you're referencing item 14. That is not on the slide that we're discussing. This is back to SB 478. For item 15, the setback correction. So what occurred with this is we're assuming back in 2008 when a code update occurred, a section was inadvertently deleted. We're just replacing it. So it's the setbacks for RE and RS zones. So nothing is being changed. We're not changing any setbacks at this time. So Riley Reb asked question number 19, how does staff anticipate this being achieved? So this is going to be for mixed base zones. Supplemental regulations for premises greater than 5 acres. Riley, 1 second, I just have to do some quick housekeeping. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties, so thank you for your patience. Perfect. So number 19, right now the code currently says that it allows for approximately I believe it's every 2 or 5 acres. We're removing the word approximability because that adds too much flexibility. So it's going to be every, I believe it is every 2 acres. It's the, we have those requirements. So Jeff, I think your item is on the next slide. I'll wait to get to that. Do we have any further questions about these items? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Now I have corrections and clarifications for item 13, 16, 18, 22, 23, 24, 26, and 52. Cheryl, I know you asked a question about brush management. This is more of an overarching question, and I don't believe related to a specific code item. I will ask that you reach out to us after this workshop. Okay, Jeff, you should be enabled to reach out to go through the questions. Are you able to unmute yourself and respond to the Q&A? Okay, I'll go back. We have Jeffrey Huter with questions on number 22, ADU conversions. I do want to state this item is related to state law. It allows language that an ADU constructed within an existing dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit does not have a maximum gross floor area, as we are not changing the home's overall gross floor area. Jeffrey had a question regarding number 1. Is there still a primary dwelling unit? If so, is there a minimum size requirement for the primary dwelling unit? There always has to be a primary dwelling unit on the site. You cannot just have ADUs present. So if there is a conversion, let's say you have a house that is 2,000 square feet, they are able to convert 1,200 of that into an ADU. According to state law, but a primary dwelling unit needs to remain. And then next question, are the setbacks defined by rules applying to the existing structure and not to the ADU? If the answer is yes, where is it stated in the code? Jeffrey, on some of these, I will get back to you after this meeting. Item 3, considering that the code allows for the construction of an ADU greater than 1,200 square feet maximum for a new detached or attached ADU, what is the definition within an existing structure? It would have to be an existing structure, it would have to be a dwelling unit. It has to have sanitation facilities as part of it. Next, Jeffrey has a question on, can a property owner expand a house, garage, or other structure and then build an ADU within that existing structure? What diffs would we do on a construction of either the expansion or the structure of the ADU? I would have to refer you to our development impact fee section. If we do have fees for the 3rd and 4th ADU on the property, if there's a conversion from a single family home to an ADU, we would take a credit approach. The next question, can a property owner construct a new auxiliary structure greater than 1,200 square feet and afterwards convert it to an ADU structure greater than 1,200 square feet? Jeff, I just want to make sure I give you the right information. I'd be happy to get back to you on that one. I know a lot of these questions that you have are more implementation. The next one you're asked about multiple ADUs and then attaching it. At this time, I hope I'm going to get back to it at a later time. I wanted to ask questions specifically about the inconversion, which, as I mentioned before, is required by state law. Charles has also added a question just about ADU regulations. Our code changes have nothing to do with the permitting process. So at this time, this isn't relevant to our workshop. I know Kay Neal is also asking about item 22. If you want to reach out to me directly after the meeting, I'd be happy to go over this item with you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to move on to our next slide. Next, I want to kind of call these our fee questions. We have a few minor corrections and clarifications to development impact fees regarding the implementation of Build Better SD. SB 9 implementation, we had an error and this is actually brought to us by a member of the community where code inadvertently said the second and third unit would not pay development impact fees. It should have said third and fourth. For the development impact fees, citywide park development, general development permits, we actually amended the process for someone to apply for a general development permit just so it makes more sense. This was an implementation error we noticed. We wanted to address it with the code update. We had a correction for item 14, affordable housing in all communities. And lastly, in our citywide park development impact fee resolution, as part of our housing action plan 1.0, we changed the name of our voluntary accessibility program. So we wanted to update it with our new program to make sure it applied. Do we have any questions regarding these items? Nathan asked, are RMX, EMX zones FAR based density? If so, how can the number of affordable units required for complete community housing solutions be calculated for these zones? For this item, what we would do is we'd apply it to, so if you look at, we have a housing solutions map, so you could actually check, yes, it is FAR based. So if it allows for, sorry, Nathan, I'm going to backtrack. You are asking for the base zone density. How will we calculate that? I'll get back to you. This is more kind of an implementation question and not related to our code update. I know Cheryl's asking us, are you taking no input from public on this year's code changes yet? Yes, we are taking input, but we're taking input related to the language we have proposed. At this time, we are not able to add any new amendments. I know Jeffrey in the chat has asked us a few questions. It's easier and it's more sequential if we can ask all questions in the Q&A section. So I'll give you a minute if you have any questions on these items to put your questions in the Q&A. So Jeffrey asked us questions for items 16 and 18 on moving and storage facilities. As part of that, we are making moving and storage facilities a prohibited use in our prime industrial land. This land is kind of reserved for our employment generation centers. So we want to ensure companies like biotech companies and other kind of employment centers have space that's available. Moving and storage facilities are still allowed in our other industrial zones. For EMX and RMX zones, this is also kind of our employment centers for our mixed employment and housing centers. So moving and storage facilities also kind of doesn't meet that intent when those zones were created. So that's why it's being moved as a prohibited use. And then Jeanette, thank you. She was responding to Nathan's questions about complete communities. They are FAR based. So I think that was the confusion. So thank you, Jeanette. Okay, I will move on to the next slide. Okay, next I wanted to bring up, these are our corrections and clarifications related to complete communities. We had a few just minor errors that we wanted to address in this code update. We are not making any policy changes to this program, but rather had minor changes. So before I move on, I just want to give everyone enough chance to just allow their questions. I see a question in the chat related to our SDA. We will address that when we get to that item. I just wanted to ensure if we had any questions for items 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, and 51 that they're addressed. Okay, I will. Okay, so James had a question for the rationale for adding on-site to the language of complete communities. As part of this program, the intent was that any affordable housing would have to be on-site. It cannot be off-site at another location. Adding on-site, it is already, so on-site, we're just being explicitly clear that those units do have to be located on-site of the property. So item 50, that's the neighbor development permit requirements. So for this item, for right now, currently a neighbor development permit for complete communities housing solution is required for anything over 95 feet. The problem is that we currently have some zones that actually have a height limit greater than 95 feet. So we didn't want to overly burden them to participate in this program, which does provide more affordable housing. So we are changing the language that the greater of the two would apply, either the 95 feet, or let's say if a property currently had a height limit of 120 feet, anything over 120 feet would then require a neighbor development permit. As of right now, we have not seen any complete communities projects downtown. I think one of the concerns was that this omission as part of the program was the culprit for it. Matthew Adams had a question, was on site in the ordinance. There is a section towards the end. So Matt, if you're able to reach out to me after this meeting, where it does specify where the units are located, I'd be happy to send that over to you. And then James asks the question that density bonus law allows for off-site. That is correct. However, the Complete Communities Housing Solutions Program is different from the density bonus program that we have.
Hi, Liz. This is Seth Lichney. I think I can jump in and clarify a few things here. So the correction that's being made is to the Complete Communities Housing Solution Program to clarify that The affordable housing must be on site. That was the intent of the program. And so there was some ambiguity in the code that we're trying to correct here. You are correct that density bonus programs that are not complete communities, any other density bonus programs that the city has, or compliance with density bonus at the state level, there is an opportunity for allowing for offsite units to be built under those programs. And we do have language in the code that says where those can go. So if a project was using complete communities, it would have to be on site. If they're using another density bonus program, there's options for where those offsite affordable units can be placed.
Thank you, Seth, for that clarification. Once again, James is asking us regarding item number 47, the on-site affordable units. Developers are still able to utilize the density bonus program. This is purely for complete communities housing solution. Nathan asked us a question about the sustainable development area. That is the code amendments related to that are the only ones that we're proposing to be delayed for a year. All the other items we're moving forward. All the other items would go into effect 30 days after the mayor signs the ordinance if approved by council. Okay, I wanted, before I moved on from the complete community slide, to see if there's any final questions. Okay. And just to let everyone know, we have 30 minutes now for our last two items. So thank you for helping us stay on track. The two items we're going to open up discussions for are the definition of sustainable development area and the sea level rise acknowledgement for coastal development. Just to help everyone out on the next slide, I'm actually going to put the language up for a sustainable development area. And for this item as well, we'd be happy to take your comments. This is currently what we are proposing. It still has to go through the public hearing process. As I mentioned before, for a sustainable development area, we are proposing that the amendments to the code regarding this be implemented a year later and not with the other code items. David is asking us questions about the current population that reside within a TPA. I will have to get back to you regarding those statistics. The same with the sustainable development area. One thing I'd like to note is we are proposing a 1-year delay on this item to ensure enough time for implementation, to make sure we have enough mapping. And then yes, to David's questions, we are working on developing maps for these items. And then Cheryl, thank you for your comments about code changes. Jeffrey has provided the link in the chat to propose 2023 code items. And then for your other item about amending the water conservation, noted, thank you for your comment. Jeffrey, thank you for your comment about offsite. This will be recorded. Jeff, I know you put some items in the chat. We have ample time if you're able to move this over to the Q&A section. Dana Gavo has several questions about item number 5. Why is the radical change being introduced as one of the many LDC updates instead of a separate standalone change? just to streamline everything, I know when we presented to the Community Planners Committee, we were changing the definition of a TPA. We were told that would lead to implementation questions, as some state programs rely on the definition of a TPA. So with the creation of a sustainable development area, so a new geographic definition, we could then apply it to city programs. I want to let Dana know, as for the definition of sustainable development area, this is something that is going to change over time. Other groups such as CPC are still welcome to submit their comments. We still have 3 public hearings scheduled for the LDC. As I mentioned, on October 27th, we plan on going to Planning Commission, followed by Land Use and Housing, and then City Council. There's 2. For the proposal for the SDA, we are following council direction.
And Liz, I think we can, just to add to that, I think this is a proposal from the planning department, and we were the only ones that were involved in the drafting of the proposal.
Thank you, Seth. And Seth, feel free to jump in. As you can tell, my voice is also starting to get pretty hoarse. Jeffrey Huter had several questions.
Liz, I can handle this one if that's
Thank you,
okay.
Seth.
Give you a break, get a drink of
Yeah.
water.
Thank you.
So I think this is the question from Jeffrey Huter. This is really what's getting at the need for a new definition of an SDA. So if we are varying from the state definition of a TPA, and therefore the intent here is to have a different name for the area where city programs will apply. Your question about being reconciled with state laws is a good one, and that's part of the reason why the definition of a TPA will remain in the code itself. We'll have a new definition for SDAs. For state programs that were required to use the transit priority area, that will be the definition in code will be there that we can reference to those kind of programs. As it relates to ADUs, one of the places where ADUs uses the definition of a TPA that would change to an SDA would be in the ADU density bonus program. SB 9, again, that's state law that dictates where there's different parking requirements for units that are built under SB 9. So it could be a place, since TPAs are mentioned in the code, where we would amend it to say SDAs. Do the SDAs align with any other jurisdiction in San Diego? We're not aware of any other jurisdiction in our region that is adopting an SDA. And has the city attorney reviewed SDA areas for compliance with state zoning laws, grants, regulations, and CEQA? As part of our process, we do submit our proposed language to the city attorney, and we do have discussions with them. And prior to it going to Planning Commission, or the Land Use and Housing Committee, they would review the language and provide us with any comments and any legal changes that would need to occur. We are internally looking at how about how this could be implemented at the local level. And so what we want to do during this 1-year time period before the sustainable development areas takes effect is address some of the questions that have come up about mapping and where does it apply, and what's what programs would fall under an SDA and what state programs would fall under a TPA. We have an opportunity to do that during this 1-year period before an SDA would take effect in the city of San Diego.
So Seth, I'm going to go on. Kathleen McLean has another question about the SDA. Who's going to maintain SDAs and how often will they be updated? Currently, TPAs are managed by Sandag, which would not be feasible going forward.
So it would be the planning department that maintains the SDAs. We have the ability to review the data that would go into determining the walking distance. We would still need to refer to Sandag for the location of major transit stops where those areas would be defined. but it would be something that would be done by the planning department. At a bare minimum, it would be updated on a 4-year basis as Sandag updates its regional transportation plan. But there could be opportunities if we see changes to the network, changes to the walking paths that could be available, where the map could be updated on a faster basis. Again, this is the type of thing that we can set up during this 1-year period before the SDAs would take effect.
Okay, the next question, Kathy's asking about the VMT determination required for Mobility Zone 3. I believe that is used from data that we get from Sandag, so we're still able to apply that, or we would still be able to apply that to our new SDA.
Yes, and as it relates to the VMT statistics, we don't have those on hand right now, but certainly you can get in touch with Liz and we can get those available. We do have information about the mobility zones on our website, and so we can share those as well.
Okay.
And then the
yeah.
last question there, Liz, I'll handle this is at the beginning of the process where these proposals will go to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council's Land Use and Housing Committee before going to City Council for approval by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Jeanette in the Q&A just said she wants to emphasize Dana's questions and concerns. David Moody, I've already addressed these questions earlier, so I'm going to skip on to the next questions. John also is, I'm going to skip on to this. Madison has a question about what city and state programs will this affect, and then their maps for the specific mobility zones referenced. We will work on getting that out to you. That's part of our implementation program. We'll also be isolating all the code changes related to an SDA in a separate document, so it's easier to kind of follow along. Right now, it's all in the same 68-page draft language. And then Madison just wanted to is asking about how will the city ensure this does not infringe on the intent of the policies and aim to streamline the development of affordable housing near transit, such as SB 10. SB 10 is part of our Housing Action Plan 2.0 that the mayor recently announced. That is a great point. This is kind of sticks to the point. We still have to analyze it while we are not changing the definition of a TPA. That is remaining the same. The SDA will only apply to our city programs or programs that we go above and beyond the state's intent. John, this is, I know we addressed this earlier, so I'm going to move on. David Moody, what is the motivation and intent on replacing transit partiers with a new definition of transit proximity that is dissimilar to existing state and municipal transit-oriented development policy? In particular, why introduce a completely new regime for transit-oriented development? 2, why define a new standard term for transit proximity rather than refine the definition of a TPAs? Number 3, shouldn't we continue fixing the TPA since some code still references TPAs? I believe we addressed this earlier. We wanted to have, and Seth as well, we wanted to have a clear delineation between the state definition of a TPA and then our new definition of a sustainable development area.
Right, and Liz, I can add on to that a little bit. Perfect. About the motivation and the intent. The sustainable development areas would take into account the walking distance that it would take from to get to the major transit stops that are identified as part of the SDA definition. And so that aligns with our climate action plan goals. It's designed to better provide opportunities for development that can reach the transit in a reasonable amount of time and ensure that we're moving forward with meeting the goals that were laid out in the newly adopted climate action plan. And then I think you've hit on the point about a good point about the refining the definition of a TPA. And part of the reason why we are introducing a new definition is because the state definition of a TPA will still apply to certain state programs. And so things like the recently approved or any place in state law where it says it needs to be within a half mile of transit, we still need to have that TPA definition in our code. And so what we can do during this time is an evaluation of state programs and local programs and where they would apply to which definition. As Liz has mentioned, the SDA, the intent of it would be to apply to our city programs, but there would still be state programs that we would be required by state law to use the TPA definition. So that's the real impetus for separating these definitions.
Thank you, Seth. Stephanie Benvenuto then asked a question: what constitutes a pedestrian path of travel? Just walking? Does that require a sidewalk or some other designated walking area? One thing I can clarify, and Seth, please feel free to jump in. The one thing we want to say, so we have walking distances as 1 mile or 0.7 miles. It doesn't matter if you're on an e-bike. I know we have a question below about that, or walking, but a pedestrian path of travel is on a sidewalk, so widely agreed upon right of way. Seth, do you have anything to add to this item?
I mean, not really. Just the idea is that this would be on public right of way, so that it would be accessible to anyone. It starts getting difficult if you've got pathways that are only accessible by certain homes, and so to ensure that there is ample ability for anyone in the general public to use the walkway, we do want to consider it to be a public right of way pedestrian path of travel on a sidewalk.
Thank you. Andrew Bowen now has a question on item 5. Does the city have a map of VMT efficient areas that would fall under mobility zone 3? The current mobility zone map shows very little of zone 3 since it's superseded by mobility zone 2. Andrew, if you can please send me an email, I'd be happy to share with you the information that we have from Sandag. And then Jeffrey Forrest asked a question: why are developers being asked to put e-bike infrastructure in their buildings if we don't account for people using e-bikes to commute? We only look at pedestrian walking pace. I think this is one more a comment as well, but I think the pedestrian path of travel is just kind of what we use that is available to anyone. Anyone could walk to transit, so we kind of use that as our benchmark. Christine Smith asked a question: shouldn't the map be presented to the public for comment before asking for approval by the council for change? We will do our best to get everything out to everybody. As this is only the public workshops, we have not even started our notice public hearings. As I mentioned, we have Planning Commission on October 27th. Jeanette has a comment: whose 15-minute walk in state already has a definition. You are making complete communities less attractive. Transit only expands to meet ridership, not another way around. Thank you very much for your comment. Andrew Bowen has a question: will complete communities projects and ADU bonus projects be limited to SDs instead of TPAs? Seth, would you want to expand on that?
Yes, those are the type of programs that are locally adopted. And so those would be the types that would fall under SDAs instead of TPAs.
Madison has a question: how will these mobility zones align with Sandag Mobility Hubs within the RTP?
I can address that too, Liz. So the Sandag Mobility Hubs assume a larger area with access by a number of different mobility types, like neighborhood, transit, and things like that. While the sustainable development areas will be more focused on a walking distance rather than a biking distance or other things like that. They will be, it is aligned with Sandag's location of major transit stops. And so the idea here is that we can get housing within a walkable distance to the mobility hubs, and that would align with the goals of Sandag's mobility hubs, which is to have housing near transit.
Dana Gavo has a comment. Until you know how SDAs will affect the code of maps versus the TPAs, why would you change the code?
Again, I think the idea here is to ensure that we have local programs that align with our policy goals for the climate action plan. So the intent here is to have an area where these local programs could be utilized, with the knowledge that we would still need to allow for state programs to be administered through the state definition of a TPA.
Jeffrey Huter just has a comment. I disagree. What was just said by Seth Litchney, you're just moving all the problems. We have a new definition that is in contradiction to state law. Thank you for your comment. Nathan is asking us, will there be ArcGIS maps posted specifying SDAs prior to them superseding TPAs? And will the complete communities ArcGIS map be updated accordingly?
I think that would be our intent.
And then Complete Communities is a city program. So we are able to use the new geographic designation for that. It is not a state program. And then Dana has a comment. The city's TPA definition continues to require revisions because it continues to rely on crow flies, definitions that have people 3 miles from transit falling to TPA. Dana, thank you for your comment. We have this noted and I'll be put into the record. Matt is asking, is a copy of your PowerPoint available? Yes, I will be happy to put it up on the code update website. Christine Smith has just a comment. Thank you for your comment. It'll be noticed in the record. Christine Smith has a question. Why are you recommending 3/4 to 1 mile? Seth, would you be able to assist with that?
The idea here is to ensure that we have an area where our housing programs would still apply, while also having a distance that is accessible to pedestrians.
Kathleen McLeod asked, will the SDA be measured as the crow flies or in a 1/4 or half-mile walking distance? Our intent is that it is a walking distance. It would not be a crow flies. We have another comment from Dana in the chat. Thank you for your comment. We will review it. John Allen has another comment. Jeffrey has another comment about e-bikes. Matthew, we have another comment by Matthew. Sorry, I'm just moving through it, trying to make sure we address everyone's comments. Stephanie Benvenuto has an estimation of potential loss. We will work on calculating those figures for you. And Jeffrey Huter has another, Jeffrey, thank you for your comment. If you're taking a year to figure this out, why not figure this out and then put it into the 2023 code update or appropriate process?
I think this allows for us to have a path forward for how we would implement these changes. And then it gives us an opportunity to explain the technical details behind the programs that would, or basically the technical information behind what programs would fall under a sustainable development area and what programs would continue to be under a transit priority area.
Andrew, for your questions, is the city going to do a fair housing analysis regarding this? Please reach out to us by email and we'll get back to you. And then I see that Jeff is addressing Christine Smith's question. And then Nathan Reed has a question. Section 143-1103A2 previously stated that any premises located either partially or entirely in TPA, the updated draft does not distinguish between partially or entirely, which these two will be following the adoption of this code. I think for that one, we have not made a determination. And then Jeffrey Heater has a comment. I see Stephanie Benvenuto has her hand raised. Is there a question that you're able to put in the Q&A? Okay. Thank you guys all for your questions. If we weren't able to answer them, we'll be happy to do our best to follow up via email. I just want to reiterate, I know Jeff Ryan has shared this already for the 2023 code update submissions. The new portal is already open. We also have another public workshop scheduled for next Tuesday. At this time, I'd like to hand over the meeting to Brian Schoenfish that will be taking the lead on the downtown PDO.
All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Brian Schoenfish. I am the Deputy Director in the Development Services Department who oversees the Urban Division. For those of you who don't know, the Urban Division oversees both the long-range planning and the permitting for downtown San Diego. So our boundary is limited to just downtown San Diego. So that's what I will be speaking about today. I'm going to share my screen and let me have a quick PowerPoint here to go through. Okay, let me just pull this up and okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm going to do this a little differently in terms of format because again, my focus here is just on the items that relate to downtown San Diego because downtown has its own zoning code. It's the Center City Plan District Ordinance. So these do not affect the citywide land development code, only downtown San Diego. So what I'm going to do is quickly go through these items at a very high level. And then I'll just open it up to, after I'm done with that presentation, I'll just open it up to Q&A on any of the items. So again, Brian Schoenfish with the Urban Division. And as part of the annual update process, again, this year, just as we have in previous years, we have some downtown specific items that are amendments, proposed amendments to the Center City Plan District Ordinance. And so I will briefly go over these items. We have had a number of discussions already with the certain downtown stakeholders, including the Downtown Community Planning Group and other stakeholders in the downtown area relating to these items. So I'm going to jump right into the first item, and this is kind of an overall theme. It actually relates to several items that we are amending here, and that's that we want to make the Center City Plan District Ordinance more user-friendly. And how do we do that? There's a lot of unnecessary language that's currently in the ordinance. It's over 100 pages long, and it really doesn't need to be, because a lot of the language that's in there either repeats things that are already in the land development code, the citywide code, or there's language that's policy language. There's a lot of non-regulatory language that's already in the community plan that doesn't really belong in the regulations themselves. So our goal here is to really make it more user-friendly and simplify it. I've been in this position now for just over a year, and one of the things I've noticed over this last year and in talking to different stakeholders is that it is overly complex, and we want to make it more user-friendly for all the users, for the community planning group members, for the developer, for just the community in general, and for staff as well that has to implement these regulations. So that is kind of an overarching theme to the code, and also as part of that, it hasn't been updated in a while in regards to looking at the language that no longer is relevant. This goes back to the days of when there was a redevelopment agency downtown with CCDC and Civic San Diego. So there's a lot of references to redevelopment and redevelopment related terms that we can eliminate from the code at this point. So that is, again, an overarching theme that applies to a lot of the items. And on the screen, I'm also listing certain items that these apply to. Another theme that we are proposing here is to allow for the stacking of the incentive programs. Right now, there's 8 downtown specific incentive programs in addition to the affordable housing density bonus and incentive programs that apply citywide. And so a couple of years ago, we amended the land development code citywide to allow for the stacking of incentives. And what that means is you can use multiple programs. You're not limited to using one particular program. If you want to do an affordable housing density bonus and you also want to build a park on site and use the park bonus program, you can use both. The downtown in the downtown code right now doesn't really allow for that. So we want to make sure that we are specifically allowing for that you can use multiple programs, provide multiple benefits, and receive multiple incentives. So that is one of the proposed changes that we are including in this year's item. Another item, and this is really important, this came from discussions with several community members over the past year, is clarifying the public use section of the Center City Plan District Ordinance. This relates to parks, this relates to schools, this relates to other public uses. Really making sure that that there is flexibility in the code to allow for joint use activities to take place. For example, this really started with a conversation around a public arts high school that is under discussion right now of locating somewhere in the downtown community and being able to do a joint use park on that site, and partnering with the school district and the city of San Diego to allow that to happen on one of our sites. So we don't have specifics on that project yet, but we want to make sure that that is allowed and there's no obstacles as we were looking at sites. We want to make sure that the code clearly allows us to move forward with that process. So what this does, again, is really kind of provide some general language on public uses that allows for that flexibility. Another item here, number 11, and this comes up several times throughout the code. If you recall, last year, as part of the citywide land development code, there were some amendments to the airport-related amendments that essentially there was an amendment to allow for the what's called now the airport land use compatibility zone, and that what that did is that replaced the airport environs and approach overlay zone, and that amendment was made throughout the citywide land development code. However, it got lost and it did not translate into the Center City PDO. So this is really going back now and correcting all the references to the former airport environs and approach overlay zone, which no longer exists, and simply referencing the correct airport land use compatibility zone. So just want to put this out there because I know this is drawing some attention. What are we doing with the airport? All we're doing here is really referencing the correct overlay zone and making that correction. That sometimes with our planned district ordinances is when amendments are made citywide, we want to make sure that they also get captured in our PDOs. And this is just a case of that happening. Item 14, this may sound controversial, but it's really not. Drive-throughs are not allowed in downtown San Diego. They're not allowed in the Center City PDO today. And there's just no language stating that. They're just not an allowed use. So this question comes up time and time again. And quite honestly, our staff is tired of answering the question. So we are specifically putting language in there that expressly states that drive-throughs are not allowed because they are not. And so that's really all that this change does. Something similar here, clarification on research and development uses in our office zones. Again, there's a lot of life science uses that are interested in downtown. There's a lot more life science developments that are happening downtown. So this is a question that comes up quite frequently. Is R&D allowed? And yes, R&D is allowed in our office zones downtown. This was something that was expanded several years ago, and we just want to make that clarification that this is an allowed use as we continue to see more life sciences, hopefully locate to downtown San Diego. Item 16, this is an interesting one. For those of you that have known downtown for quite some time, been around downtown, you see a proliferation of empty surface parking lots all over downtown. This is something I know the community planning group is very much interested in, looking at solutions to how can we turn these underutilized properties into something positive, into affordable housing. Or some other use. And so we looked at what can we do to help incentivize the redevelopment of these particular sites. We've had conversations with some of the owners of these parking lots. Quite frankly, some of the owners told me that, you know, they get a check every month from the parking revenue and they're quite happy keeping this as parking lots. So what can we do to incentivize these becoming a more active use, especially when we have a housing crisis in this city, given the location of many of these sites next to transit and located obviously in downtown San Diego, where it makes sense to have this higher density residential development. So essentially what this would do is if you are using one of the affordable housing density bonus programs on one of these sites that has an existing empty surface parking lot or surface parking lot today as of a certain date, which I believe is January 1st of this coming year, then you would get an additional incentive on top of your affordable housing density bonus incentive. So again, this would create more additional affordable housing on these sites and hopefully help to stimulate development on these sites. Items 17 through 24, what this really addresses is improving these existing incentive programs that are already in the Center City Plan District Ordinance. And as I mentioned before, there are 8 unique incentive programs currently in the Center City Plan District Ordinance. I'm going to go through just a couple of those in a moment, but what we really did is we looked at comprehensively over the last few years. Our staff has looked at these programs. Which ones are working, which ones aren't working, which ones could be more efficient? Are we seeing the types of results that were first envisioned when these were put into place over 10 years ago? It's actually been probably about 15 years now since many of these were adopted. And what can we do to improve upon them? Because we want to make sure they're working. We want to make sure we don't just have these programs in place. For example, if we're incentivizing park construction downtown and we're not seeing those parks being built, then what can we do to help facilitate that? So we really did take a deep dive at these programs and see if we can improve upon them. And one of those programs is we have what's called the Urban Open Space Incentive Program. It's not open space in the traditional sense of green open space canyons and so forth. What this is really public plazas, public park space. You see this downtown in several locations in front of developments. We have some really good examples where we have some active spaces, and then we have examples like this, where it's just essentially a paved open area. There's no amenities, there's no benches, there's no active, spaces. There's not any little dog runs or playground equipment or anything to interact with, other than a plaque that you can see attached to that palm tree there that says Public Plaza, open 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So right now, the way the program is, it currently allows for this, and this is you receive an incentive for providing this. We want to improve upon that. And we looked at how we can do that. And one of the ways that we thought, and we drafted some language to that effect, is let's align it with the Parks Master Plan that was adopted last year in terms of providing a point system and using the point system from the Parks Master Plan. If you provide a certain number of amenities, you get a certain number of points, which translates into your incentive. And this also expands not just from this open space, but also if there's some interior space. There's some museums downtown. There's other museums that want to locate downtown. So we have museum space. Public restrooms is something that's highly desired downtown. So we expanded it to allow for public restrooms as well as part of these developments. Little outdoor amphitheater space, as long as it's open to the public, as long as there's a public benefit, and there are actual amenities associated with it, we are tying it to a point system. We think this is something that actually will be used more frequently by developers and also, of course, by the public. It opens up, it creates additional public space downtown, and that's something that we want to continue to promote. Another program that we already have on the books downtown is a 3-bedroom family housing incentive program. This may sound familiar to many of you because last year, as part of the Land Development Code update citywide, we actually also brought forward a similar program based on the downtown program. Many of the programs that we piloted downtown, we're able to look at their success and translate them to citywide regulations at some point in the future if they seem to be successful. And this is one that is successful. However, it's not successful on the scale that we would like it to be. And so we really need more family-friendly and more diverse types of housing downtown, not just studios and 1-bedroom apartments and condos, but family housing. And that's real. And that's because in the most recent downtown demographic study that came out earlier this year, over 60% of the housing downtown is really for single individuals and non-family housing. And we need to diversify that housing stock, make downtown a place that is attractive to all different types of people, including families. We've invested so much in our infrastructure, in our transit, in our bicycle lanes, in our greenway streets, and in our parks. We have quite a few parks under construction right now, and some that were recently completed. And there's this large investment in downtown. We want to invest and make sure that there are people, a diversity of people that are living downtown and working downtown. So this is improving upon that program by further incentivizing the 3-bedroom and family units downtown, as well as more middle income and moderate income housing. Another very important program, and this is a new program that would be adding to the downtown, to the Center City Plan District Ordinance, is childcare facilities, incentivizing childcare facilities on the ground floor of buildings downtown. Again, this may sound familiar to many of you because as part of the citywide update over the last couple of years, there were childcare incentive programs that were included in that update. However, those were not applied to downtown. Those did not specifically apply to the downtown zones. And so what we're doing now is we're kind of catching up to the citywide changes that happened a few years ago and really promoting childcare facilities downtown, because it's really important here, given that downtown is such a large employment center. This is where people come to work. We need a place where people can take their children while they are at work. And also, this is also becoming more of a residential community. So it's also important, if we are going to attract more families downtown, it's important to have childcare facilities here. So this expands upon the childcare facility incentives that were adopted a few years ago in the citywide code. we also have existing transfer of development rights program in downtown San Diego that is, again, unique to downtown. What this is if you build a park on your site, if you're building a development downtown, you build a park on a portion of your site, you can transfer the development rights from that portion of the site to another site in downtown San Diego, not outside of downtown, just within downtown. This has been on the books for a number of years now, and it hasn't really been used. And there's a few reasons for that we've looked into and we found. It's overly restrictive right now, and it's also overly confusing, the language. It's several pages of I think it's about 7 pages or so of regulations. So we really want to make it more simple, cut it down to just, I think it's 2 pages or so of regulations, and make it more flexible so that it's not just specific sites. If you are building a park on your development anywhere within the downtown community, you can transfer those development rights anywhere else within the downtown community. That's what we're proposing through this, so that we get more parks and public spaces throughout our downtown community. Item 28, this is something that came up over the last year. This is an example. I'm actually showing the brewery here where this issue came up. It took them quite a while to get, not to get their permit to operate, but to get their permit so that they can sell their beer that they brew on site. They can sell it off site and following the citywide regulations. Because what happened is downtown San Diego actually came first with its brewery regulations before there were citywide regulations. And then the citywide regulations came a few years later, and they were actually not as strict as the ones that were initially put downtown many, many years ago. And so what we want to do here is make the downtown regulations in regards to breweries more in line with the citywide regulations. Right now, they are actually overly restrictive because we haven't updated them in quite some time. So that's really what this change would do here. And again, I just went over some of the highlights. There's corrections, there's the clarifications, there's a number of other items. These are really the bigger items, more significant items that are a part of the Center City Planned District Ordinance. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and we can open it up to questions.
So
Okay.
Brian, I don't see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. At this time, I want to thank everyone for attending. We will try to, within the next week, get a recording up on our website. I will also be posting our slides. Oh, Brian, we have a question from Jeffrey Forrest. Is TDR only for parks, or can it be used by any site to another?
So there are 2 types of TDR in downtown right now, and we're going to continue to keep the 2 types. One is for parks, and another is for historical resources. We are not touching the TDR's program for historical resources. That's why I didn't go over that. But the one is for parks. So if you build any type of park or public park space on your property, it does not have to be an identified park. It can be, you can propose to do a small park on your site. We will give you that credit and allow you to transfer that to another site downtown.
Great. At this time, I do not see any further questions. Thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate you sharing your comments. As I mentioned too, we have the chat and the Q&A recorded. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.